Those of you that are joining us, my name is Renee. I'm with the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. I'm a parent coordinator. And today we have Tom Shewall from the Regional Vocational Rehabilitation Center talking. He is the director of our Region 7 VR office. So I'll give you his bio here. He says he's a dad of 4, granddad of 5. Tom grew up in Western North Dakota, and even though he has lived elsewhere, he has always returned to North Dakota because of its common sense and its people. Tom is the regional director for vocational rehab in the Bismarck area, or Bismarck region, a job he's been doing since 2004. Tom has been involved in the career of rehabilitation since 1990. He lives south of Bismarck, where he raises a garden and chickens, and he collects relatives. He has 4 generations living under his roof right now. So take it away, Tom.
As you can imagine, especially being in Western North Dakota, we have a true mix of opinionated conservatives and liberal views. My mother-in-law, she's the deaf elder. She's a great-grandma. It's like yesterday. She'll be listening to something, and anyway. It gets loud in our house sometimes, and especially when she can't hear, she misunderstands, and she'll be thinking like Obama wants to take away her gum or something like that, gum control. But
okay.
But anyway,
can I just add one more thing before you get started with your presentation, Tom? Okay, we are recording this. I forgot to mention that we are recording this, so if you don't want to be on the recording, be sure to keep your camera off. And then I wanted to ask you, if you have a lot of people, we tend to like to use the chat box for questions. Would you rather that people just kind of pipe in and ask their questions, turn on their microphone, or would you rather use the chat?
Good point. Write your questions down so you remember them. I'm full of squirrel moments, and I can get easily distracted.
Okay.
So I'll present, and then at the end of the questions, I'll address that, if that's okay.
Okay, so write your questions in the chat.
Be more like a sermon then. And
okay,
so
sounds good.
Okay, I hope
all
that's
right,
okay. Okay, but with everyone and all the different views in our house, and especially us being Shewalls, someone once said, I've never seen so many say so much at the same time without anyone listening. And I think that's probably why I love raising chickens and ducks and geese, is because in comparison, it's more peaceful outside when you're in the chicken yard than when you're in the house. And the reason I'm talking about my family is because I'm going to use them later in this talk. And I also like to talk about myself a lot. So, and like I said, since I am getting older, I'm going to get a little more easily distracted, especially at work. And we call it squirrel moments. And so to help prevent me from getting into one of my squirrel moments, I'm going to talk, and then questions will be later. As you stated, I do work for vocational rehabilitation. So obviously this talk is going to center around employment. Rather than talk about the entire VR process, I want to center on one of the things of this core to our program, and that is employment. What do you want to do when you grow up? And how do we help you figure that out? And I don't care how old or young you are, I still ask that question if I ever work with you. Because I do have some of my own cases, even though I'm the administrator. As we start, I'd like to go way back to the old days. And I'm not talking about the good old days, but the days before the good old days. They might have been the bad old days, because you really didn't have a choice. You did what your parents did. If you were a boy, you did what your dad did. And if you're a girl, you did what your mom did. If your dad was a farmer, you probably took over the farm if you were the oldest son. If your dad was a shoemaker, you became a shoemaker. But if you were a girl, your choices were even more limited. You were either a wife and mother or a nun. I mean, maybe the only other option was Joan of Arc, but that didn't turn out so well. Those office was a real killer. You didn't have a lot of choices. So coming back now, if you've been keeping up with the times, you realize these days you have many, many, many more opportunities. And sometimes that can make choosing especially more challenging, especially for some people. For some people, it's an easy process. For others, it's a much more difficult process. So how do you do it? But before I get into how you do it, here's my disclaimer. It's more of a story. Um, I realize today more and more, the level of distrust in anyone perceived as an expert or a person in authority is probably worse than it ever been. I realized this when I was reading Facebook, and my brother, he calls it face plant. But there was someone on Facebook who had typed in, because they had taken their dog to the vet, and the vet had diagnosed the dog and prescribed a certain medication. But rather than go and get that medication for the dog, they went on Facebook and typed in what the symptoms were and things like that, and wanted the Facebook community's opinion. So basically, this person paid a lot of money to go to an expert, but then when they got the opinion, they put more trust in a stranger on Facebook than a highly trained and dedicated professional. So that sort of tells me of how the times are now. That is the disclaimer. So you need to decide what's best for you. I'll say what I say. You'll need to decide what to take and what to leave, what makes sense, and what you can lambaste on Facebook. So when we look at choices, when we look at what you want to become when you come to the Voc Rehab, we look at 5 major things when you're trying to decide on a job goal. One of the first things we look at, and one of the more important things, is interest. And what that is something I know, I believe I would like to do. Just as important, though, is knowing what you would hate to do, because you want to avoid that. The other thing is ability. And what we see as ability is, what can I do now? What am I capable of doing right now if nothing were to change? We look at capability. What can I learn to do or be able to do with accommodations or with more education, things like that. Where's my ceiling? What am I capable of doing? Another important thing is priorities. What are the things that are important to me right now? What are my priorities? And then also concerns. What are some of the things I worry about? What's going to cause me trouble or distress? So those are the 5 things: interests, abilities, capability, priorities, and concerns. But we also realize, because usually we put interest at the top, but as we, everyone here has different life experiences, and these priorities, these things change as far as what's going to be most important. If we find out if life is stable, then interest seems to be at the top in a person's life. That's the first thing we start looking at and working with. But if things are a little crazier than that, then we might be looking at what are a person's priorities. That might be what's more important at the time. But I'm going to start with interests. Exploring interests. One of my first confusing and aha moments when I was in college was during an internship. I was doing an internship at a nursing home. This is about 1986, and I was interviewing an old gentleman. And one of the questions I had to ask him was, "What are your hobbies?" And he got a confused look on his face. And his response was, "I didn't have hobbies. I only had time for work." And I thought his response was very interesting, because in that time the priority was you didn't look at your interests. You worked. But now I think more and more we live in a time where you can consider interests. And how does vocational rehabilitation help someone explore their interests? Well, first of all, we really do value what a person tells us. And the more life experience a person has, I think the more value that has too, because you have something to compare it to. You have experienced what you like, what you don't like, things like that. So what you tell us is really important. We're dealing more and more with people who are transition age. So they don't have a lot of life experience at work yet, but they might have had a summer job. They might have had part-time jobs. They might have done some volunteering. All those things are important. But other areas we can look at is interest tests. We can do interest tests here. There are interest tests online you can do too at home, like for instance, onet.org. You can look up different job titles, things like that. You can view little snippets of someone doing the work, but then there's also an interest test that you can do online too, and it is, it's fairly informative. Those are, those are all different ways that we can try to drill down to help someone at least narrow. We're not trying to find any one specific job. We're probably trying to find more of a job category, because as you realize, for instance, my career has been human service center or human services, and that's been my main interest. But within that, I've done several different jobs. So to pick, just say I'm going to only do this job is, how do you say, really self-limits somebody. I've heard, and sometimes it's true, and the reason we look at interests is if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. There's also some people who say if you do what you love or love what you do, the money will follow, whether or not there's an opportunity in it now. But unfortunately, with interest, sometimes we find out what we love is not what we can make money at. For instance, I love family. I love being a granddad, but no one's going to pay me to do that. I did try. I married an insurance agent and thought I had it made. And then I realized she'd have to own her own agency to make the big bucks. So I had to continue working. So I love being a parent. Being a parent doesn't pay the bills. My own dad, he's actually a world known, I don't want to say renowned, that'd be bragging, but world known carver. I didn't know how good he was and how much other people appreciated his items until I tried buying a couple of his items that he had given to a neighbor, but the neighbor passed away, and now they're having a family auction. And how much that stuff went for, that someone actually flew in just to bid on his things. And I had asked him, why didn't you ever think of because he loved wood carving. I said, why didn't you ever think of that as an occupation? Because then he looked at me and said, because then it would have been a job. So interests are important, but we still got to consider other factors too. And it is definitely one of the things we look at when we're working with someone. So that's interests. The next thing is abilities. And that is, what am I able to do now? For instance, when I was a freshman in high school, I couldn't do a lot. I didn't have my driver's license yet, so I couldn't be a delivery person. Didn't have a high school diploma, so any job requiring a high school diploma, I didn't have the ability to do. I hadn't had taken typing yet, and I don't think it was until my senior year that I actually saw and touched a computer, so there's no way I was going to be able to work with a computer. I didn't have that ability. Didn't have the ability to do public speaking, but there were some things I could do. And as I got old, but as we all get older, our abilities increase as we gain experience and gain skills. So when we work with someone on developing their job goal, abilities are a very important thing to consider. And because I might want to be something, am I able to be that right now, especially if I need a job right now? So we might be looking at, if someone comes to us and they say, I need a job right now, I need to work right now, we key into their abilities. And how do we figure that out? Well, number one, again, it's what you tell us. This is what you've done. This is what you believe you can do, things like that. We'll look at your work history. We can do abilities testing here. We have an assessor on site who will do certain testing that is able to help flesh out a person's current abilities. There are some other things we can do. Sometimes people are so much more hands-on that we'll try a situational assessment where if an employer lets us, we'll actually have that person go and try a job and see if it's something they can do, and what things could they do better, where their skills at, is it something they'd even like. Grades, what kind of school grades did someone get? If someone's looking at college, we'll be looking at their ACT or SAT scores as well as grades. Level of education allows you to do different things. Um, we can do psychological testing, and any testing that we do, we pay for. We don't charge for our services, but and if we need to have someone go through something so that we can help them move their case forward, we're going to pay for it. So if someone needs a psychological test, a neuropsych, a functional capacity assessment, so we know physically what are their capabilities, we'll pay for it. Um, the next thing, and when I started out in Voc Rehab, I didn't understand the difference between ability and capability. I thought it was the same thing. Ability is what can I do now? Capability is what can I become? So, in high school, there's only certain things I was able to do. But now that I've graduated, got my master's, there's more things that I'm capable of doing. What can I become with or without accommodations? Um, and what do I need to become that? Um, what's interesting, and this wasn't, I don't know if it was an aha moment, but I'll still share it anyway. I was at a presentation one time with Voc Rehab, and the presenter, and I've always been a dreamer. It's like if you, how do you say, if you love something enough, it'll all work out. And he sort of poked a hole in that, and he said, "Well, that's all fine and dandy, but you really need to start looking at what you're good at because and this was a professional. Um, I can't remember if he was an athlete, but he said something that really stuck with me. He said, let's say you want to do something. What you want to do for your career is what you're already fairly good at. Because if you want to be extremely successful, um, you want to concentrate not so much on what you love, but what you're good at. And with Voc Rehab, a lot of times we start with what you love. He said, for instance, if I'm a 5 out of 10, 1 to 10, one being the worst, 10 being the best. If I'm a 5 at something, even with all the training and preparation in the world, I'll probably become a 7 at it, which is okay. But if I'm a 3 at it, with all the training and preparation in the world, I'll only become a 5. And now you're not going to be so successful at it. But if it's something that you're already a 7 at or an 8 at, with training and preparation, you're going to become a 9 or a 10. And you're going to be very, very, very successful at doing that. So that's something to consider when we work with someone. Sometimes someone might love the idea of doing something, but even when we look at their abilities and capabilities, they're probably not going to be successful at it, and they're going to experience a lot of hardship with it. For instance, and this is sort of the reverse of it. Well, no, it's the same thing. Our third child, she was very, very, very good at math. She was probably one of the top 3 in the state, and she was a mathlete. But she hated it. She hated math, but it was so easy. She has such a math mind. What did she love? Boys. That's what she loved and wanted is boys. And in fact, and sadly enough, she gave up scholarships to Yale and to Harvard because she didn't want to start college and ended up chasing boys. She was in love with so and so and was going to, just wanted to be around him. And he was a very unmotivated boy. And she never did start college. And she lost the scholarship. Well, that didn't work out because what she loved, she wasn't good at. She wasn't good at picking someone who was good for her. Fast forward a little bit, she finally found something, how to say that she would like and that she can be good at, and that's being a nurse. And she's in college right now. She's in her senior year. She really likes it. Her how do you say, her career isn't boys anymore. It's becoming a nurse. She still has boys as a hobby, but she's doing much better, and she's able to afford her own home and all those things. So sometimes what you love may not be what is the best path for you. Um, Now, how do we assist someone in determining what their capabilities are? Again, it's many of the it's common sense things. Many of the things we look at when we're looking at abilities, because as we're exploring abilities, we're probably also exploring and uncovering capabilities. Same thing with grades. Can look at a psychological assessment if we have a question. For instance, if someone has a learning disability and we don't know if they're going to benefit from college, we will do that because then it also shows us what kind of accommodations might that person need, so we can help support their college experience so they can be successful. Without that kind of support, maybe they're only capable of achieving here, but with the right kind of support, maybe they can achieve up here. Um, I think though, as far as when it comes to capabilities, one of the most important things is habits. Um, the person's personality. Does a person give up when they're facing adversity, or are they able to get it out? Um, you know, or are they a gregarious person? Someone who's more gregarious, they might be better at sales, but capable of being an excellent either presenter, salesperson, teacher, things like that. Someone who does not like attention to detail might be very smart, but doesn't like attention to detail, probably shouldn't become an accountant. They probably aren't capable of being a good accountant. Um, I have another daughter. I have four. She wants to be, her love is be, to be a geologist, paleontologist or geologist. She doesn't have the brains of the daughter who likes boys. But she has better habits than the daughter who likes boys. She has never gotten a scholarship in her life, and she's a senior as well. Um, but for her thing, it's not math. She hates math. Has not been real great at it, but it's a subject she has to achieve at to be able to get into the field of geology. But she is someone who guts it out. She failed her first calculus class or for course. So she got an F for that. But she went back and she took it and used the right help and was able to achieve. Now she's taken trig and successfully completed that. Calculus 2 successfully completed that. So here her habit is helping her, how do you say, overcome the barriers that are getting in the way. And so she has a better chance of becoming more capable of being a geologist because she's willing to do what it takes to get there. Again, the habit is overcoming maybe some of those things that she would have considered limitation. And I think everyone has, well, obviously everyone has a ceiling, and sometimes we don't realize it till later in life. I loved being a VR counselor. I think that's probably where I shone the brightest. I like being an administrator. I would hate being a state director because I just don't have those skills. So finding where we fit is real important. As us, finding satisfaction in our job. Again, how do we? Well, anyway, I'm going to skip that. Since this is North Dakota, I'm probably related to at least 1/3 of you. So we probably share the same ancestors or some of the same ancestors. And my ancestors settled around the area of Leffer. One side of the family, the Shewalls, their first winter here, they lived under a wagon they had flipped over and used as a roof over a hole that they cut in the hill. The other side of the family, the Leffers actually is their name. They carved a hole and lived in a cave their first year. And I'm trying to think in what or why would a person willingly leave a warm home to travel to a distant country to live in a hole in the ground? And they did it because they saw potential. They saw what they were capable, or what life in North Dakota could become. They saw what could be, and so that's what we're trying to do when we're looking at what is a person capable of. It can take sacrifice to get there. And to think, at that time, it was a family of five living under a wagon for about 5 months. And how we have become, I don't want to say softer, but I was one of 10 kids growing up, and three of us boys had to share a bed. And I thought we had it bad. But it was sort of funny though, because two of us were bedwetters, but the third one didn't realize that he wasn't a bedwetter until we moved into a bigger house and he got his own bed. So anyway, moving on to the next component, priorities. Priorities are what is important to me right now. And also we need to be considering what's going to be important to me later. Sometimes we work with people whose priority is right now, especially during the time of COVID. We've seen a lot of people switching their priorities. So if someone's we've seen people who've lost their jobs, they have to pay bills. What's more important, health or eating? You know, they're having to look at those things. I have these conditions that, and if I get COVID, I could die, but I need to eat. You know, so it's really, it's sort of shaken things up. We've had to re-roll the dice. Um, you know, one thing I don't understand though is when I do work with someone who doesn't have a job, doesn't have money coming in, needs to pay their bills, but is unwilling to look at what they can do, what is readily achievable. Um, for instance, one person once told me, I don't want that job because I might sweat. So in fact, their priority wasn't employment and paying the bills. Their priority was to smell good, and that's hard to work with when that happens. But this, I was not working in North Dakota at the time. I find North Dakota, my job got a lot easier because there's a stronger work ethic here, and more people. The priority is, you know what, I wanna work. Um, my mother-in-law, I'll use her as an example. Um, she found herself one day suddenly no longer a housewife, but a homeless single mom with three kids. And so, what do you think her priorities were at the time? She had to take a job, any job, multiple jobs to be able to pay for food and shelter. She couldn't consider if she liked the job or not because survival was a priority. Feeding the babies was a priority. Um, Long story short, but how does VR help you figure out your priorities? For some people, it's pretty obvious. It's as blatant as what my mother-in-law went through. But for others, it's less obvious, especially if you're a person like me who had a decent upbringing and you're lucky enough to have a choice and time to figure out what you want to do in the future. Um, in those situations, we'll make observations, um, you know, of obviously like your habits, your choices, your decisions. We'll explore your personality because you know, some personalities go better with certain jobs, but not with other jobs. I had a teacher in college. He was a good teacher, but he, when he was done with class, his jacket was just covered with chalk because he was scared of the class. So he liked teaching, and that was probably his big priority is being a teacher. But but he was scared of public speaking, but for whatever reason, no, he had the courage to approach it every day. But it was funny because he'd write something and he'd turn around to talk to class, and then he'd wipe it off with the back of his jacket because he stood against the chalkboard and moved like that. There's a tool we use too to help explore priorities, and I really, it's my favorite tool. It's called a value sort. And what we'll do is we'll sit down with somebody and we'll have them sort of rank their values from, you know, a scale of 1 to 4. And then we'll have all these cards, like 100 different cards with 100 different values. And then we'll have them just remove all the ones that didn't rate as 1 on the scale. And they'll have like, you know, 20 to 30 cards that are rated 1, like it's most important to me. And then we ask them, okay, now get rid of all but 10. And that's interesting to watch how someone, and you get more out of watching them hang on to a card and then decide whether or not to place it down or move it aside. Because again, it's another way of exploring someone's priorities when you look at their values. Um, Finally, concerns is one of the areas that we have to consider when looking at helping a person determine what's going to be a good job goal. Um, what is troubling them, or what is going to stress them? What are the things that they might worry about? And some example is, a concern would be, I might like this job, but I'm not going to make enough money to pay the bills at it. So that would be a concern. A big concern for a lot of people is losing benefits. If I work how many hours before I lose my Social Security or before I lose my benefits? Um, a lot of times we see that those concerns prevent a person from taking a leap, or fear of failure. Someone who has a lot of anxiety and has faced a lot of rejection, they fear failure and can sometimes outweigh all the other things. Um, for instance, we have one daughter who has a disability, and she'll only dip her toe into employment and then pull it back at the first time of trouble because she is so fearful of failing. But we're going to keep trying. Um, how do we explore a person's concerns? Well, obviously, we talk it out. Again, I think one of the most important things we can do with someone is the vocational counseling guidance aspect of what we do. And not only try to hear what they fear, but maybe even bring some of the things up that they might not have considered, but they might have to confront when they're at work. Or they start a job, because we've had some people come to us who have significant medical conditions, who they really do need to be on some type of health insurance, and if they work this many hours, this might be what happens. Are they ready for that? Because really, forewarned is forearmed. Can help someone explore options. When it comes to I heard something one time and I didn't believe it. I was talking about fear a little while ago. I had a psychologist once tell me, we will assume the worst every time there's a situation where we do not have enough information. I didn't believe him, because I thought I was someone who's more positive, that how do you say, a more positive person would think of the best. But that all went out the window the first time one of my daughters was 15 minutes coming home late. All of a sudden you're thinking, oh my God, what happened? Were they attacked? Did they have a car crash? Things like that. Then it really hit home. To counter that, and I think a lot of times with employment, that's the same thing. If we don't give someone enough information, and they have these questions, they're going to assume the worst. That's going to be the answer. Especially when it comes to benefits, Social Security, things like that. We have a benefits planner that can help that person to understand what earning money will do to their benefits, and some of the benefits of earning money, and some of the other things they can plug into. So we can help eliminate as much of the unknown as is possible. I think one of my concerns, though, was I didn't have until college, and that was a college professor once said to the class, our class in college, he was a sociology professor, he said, your generation and your children's generation will have a lower quality of life than the previous one, because we've reached the end of the road. We have reached that apex, and now it's going to go downhill from there. I think part of it was because now they were looking at people, rather than one income being able to support a family, now it's two incomes for the same quality of life, and so on. Anyway, long story short, though, when it comes time to choose a career, we try to take the time that's needed. So if you are out of high school, though, we have to have that done in 90 days. We have to go through those 5 things and explore them within 90 days. A person once told me, though, having to switch occupations, especially if you've experienced a disability and suddenly you're done, you cannot do your job anymore, It's like being asked, it's like losing a spouse, having your spouse die, someone you loved, and then within 90 days, you're supposed to marry someone else. So sometimes that's a very difficult journey for somebody because who do you spend the most time with? It's not who, it's what. You spend most of your time with your job, your waking hours. Um, and to do that in 90 days, for some people, seems like, wow, that's way too long. But for others, it's sort of a shock to the system yet. We still got to do it. It's a federal requirement. Within 90 days, we have to help someone discover their career path. Unless you're a high school student. There we have something called a transition assessment plan, where uh, we can extend that period of time where we're trying to help someone explore what they want to be until right before graduation. So if they apply as a junior, then we have almost 2 years to help that person discover that. Because I think it's sort of unfair to ask a high school student who really doesn't have a lot of work experience yet, what do you want to be for the rest of your life? So they need more time to figure that out. I guess in conclusion, I was thinking about this last night because I was sitting around the fire with all 4 generations of my family. Great grandma, she's picking on Atticus, he's the 4-year-old. Our daughter was talking about her next art project that she wants to do, and my wife was talking about a friend who isn't feeling well. We're all enjoying a real quiet time together, roasting marshmallows, drinking water. I had no idea how I was going to organize my thought for today, this presentation, but then it dawned on me as an employee, as a husband, as a father, and as a grandfather, and I have one purpose in life I figured out, and that's to prove my professor wrong and help assure that my family's quality of life and the quality of life of my clients is as good as the previous generation. So anyway, so I thank you for the opportunity to talk today because it helped me figure that out. Any questions?
There were a couple questions or a question or two onto the chat. One, okay. And this was from JC. I don't know if JC's back on. She had to log off and get back on her phone, but
okay.
She was wondering, what is the interest survey site the schools use? Do you know?
You know what? That varies. Because there is one, oh gosh, and I'm not a transition counselor. Is it called My Life? There is you know what? I'm just gonna have to email that because the counselors would know. The schools, we don't really have access to it. The schools have access to it. Students are able to save a lot of that information on that. And I believe one of the things they have is an interest assessment on there. So like Plan My Life or something like that.
Yeah, I'm back on. I had it written down somewhere and I can't remember what it was.
Yeah. Because I know
I lost all my info. Okay, Jake.
I will send that out to the group.
This is good. Yeah, if you just send it to me, Tom, I can get it to her.
Right. And I know I can walk, well, he's not here right now, but Elton down the hall, if I just asked him, he'd say, oh, yes.
Elton knows everything.
Yeah. But I know, for instance, ONET is one, but you can't save the results. You have to print them and then, or do move them over to a PDF and then you can save them.
What's the one that VR uses?
Oh, we use several. One of our more popular ones is called the WOWI. That's an interest test and abilities test.
Okay.
And it can be, there's 2 levels of it. If you're someone, let's say you have at least high school abilities, we'll use that one. Or if you have, let's say, like a 4th grade reading level, we'll use that one. But we also have, if someone is not literate, we have some visual interest test too that a person can use. There's another one we call the VCAT. We're not using that one as much because of the WOWI. We also use, there's a booklet we hand out to youths, and that's the career index. It's strictly for North Dakota and mainly for North Dakota students. Every high school student gets one, but in there is an interest test. And then it also, what I like about it is you can then identify those jobs that pop up under your interest in the booklet, and it will tell you how much you can make at that job. It'll even get into what colleges train that, and how much you can make, um, what classes you should take in high school if you want to go into college, be accepted into college into that program. And that's we find that it's how to say, it's an oversimplification, but it's fairly effective because you can only pack so much into like a 50-page magazine. And so
That's for sure. And then, Tom, one of the things we kind of discussed last night a little bit with, we did an IEP training last night, and I know that you guys come in, your VI counselors come into the schools and start working with kids typically when they're junior year, the beginning of their junior year. But I know that, like, and I've worked with Elton, that they like to start getting to know some of these kids a little earlier than that, especially the ones that are more significantly affected, so that they can get a better idea of how to help them.
Right, right.
So
that's
so
what we recommend.
Okay. Yeah. And if your school doesn't really encourage it, they can just come into your office and get registered, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Especially right now, it's really interesting because some schools will not allow staff to go in there. So we can try to do things remotely. If they have access to a computer, we will do an intake over computer, or even just the IEP where they're not even a client yet. They might want to know about us. Being able to do it, attend an IEP over the phone, or through, we can't use Zoom for IEPs as a state employee, but we can use.
They're using Teams, right? Microsoft
Yeah, we're
Teams?
using Teams, and I think there's Google Meets or something like that, or we can use.
Yeah.
But what did they say? Zoom, that's kept in China. The cloud or whatever they have is kept in China.
I know there's some issues with confidentiality with Zoom.
Yeah, yeah. Unless it's the health department, the health Zoom, I guess it's a higher level, but some schools, but that costs money.
Yeah.
So, or costs more money. But it's been different. But yeah, however we get to a person, or however a person gets here, we want to be able to provide them with information. We are finding, though, sometimes more and more people as young as 8th grade, they're wanting to refer, but that's too young.
And what would be the youngest that is okay?
Well, the youngest legally would be 14.
Okay.
But now, let's say someone is going to go to school till they're 21. 7 years of us not doing too much is probably a bit much. Okay. So we try to take it case by case, though. I had a teacher call me yesterday and ask in reference to something just like that. And we decided that, and this person, there's no, significant concerns. So we figured, I like to tell people the summer after your sophomore year is a perfect time to apply, because things are a little slower in the summer, and it also helps prevent that big rush in the fall when most people then try to apply, and then we can't get to everybody sometimes. So if people start the summer after their sophomore year, that'd be ideal.
And you typically just go in and work with the kids who are on IEPs, is that correct? If you go into the schools?
Well, typically that's mostly correct. There's a couple schools we will go in and work with a class or whatever for what they call pre-ETs, the potentially eligible transition students. And that's something that we can do. We can go in, and I know we have our evaluator has gone out and done an interest testing for a couple rural schools because they find that helpful. Our business specialist has gone out and helped people do mock interviews in the schools, and they haven't had to be clients, just potentially clients. Okay. And it's just to try to help people become more familiar with our program and hopefully apply when the time is right, or before they're a senior, because a lot of times there's a significant number that wait till the final semester of their senior year before they apply. And it's really hard developing a plan with someone when they apply in April. So we're not able to develop a plan until after they maybe even have started college, So we like it when someone can apply as a sophomore, we're willing to go out and do, how do you say, hopefully helpful things. Some people might call it a dog and pony show, just to get people more familiar with our program. And there are, in this region, I know the Bismarck public school system, we have a contract with, and we pay a grant so that, and they have 3 transition specialists hired to help to provide certain things to anyone who has an IEP in high school, whether it be self-advocacy training, maybe job exposure, interest testing related to employment, things like that. And that is helpful too, because then when they get to the, again, they're recommended to apply towards for our program. And when the time is right, I'm having a senior moment here for a second, but that's nice because they'll identify those people and then we can track them because they'll sign a release to participate in those transition activities. And so we know about how many potentially eligible people we have coming, and they're definitely encouraged to apply through those transition coordinators. And so we've definitely seen an increase in numbers of transition students applying. A lot more, it used to happen a lot more frequently when someone would come to us. They were like 2 years out of high school and they were on an IEP and we never even heard about them. That's happening fewer and fewer times. Now more and more people who are on an IEP are being referred and are becoming clients. And that's a good thing.
Awesome.
So.
Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us. And like I said, we did record this. And so if we have people that want to, listen to it, we can do that. We're going to be getting these onto our website one of these days once we get it all figured out. So all of our sessions will be on our website. Yeah, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, I said, thanks for inviting me. Thanks for being kind. Thanks for acting interested.
We're always interested in you, Tom.
Well, it was nice seeing some reaction because it's sure different. You can't read a room anymore.
No, it's hard.
Especially when, but on the other hand, I don't hear people whispering to each other, or I don't see people looking at not paying attention and things like that. So that part's helpful. Anyway.
That's true.
Okay.
You can just assume that everyone is paying very close attention to you.
That's what I was doing.
And I know everybody was. I know they all were.
Okay.
It
was a good group.
Well, thank you, Tom.
And
if you would take a look at the chat, there's a link there to go to a Survey Monkey if you want to do a survey on how how this session went. We'll be sending out links to all of our different Survey Monkeys for our different sessions. So that's good. Tomorrow we are going to have Matthew talking about supported decision making. And then that's at 1 o'clock. And then at 2 o'clock, we're going to be having a group of kids from the YES group, which is what JC is from. Are you familiar with YES, Tom?
Yes, I am. Okay. I think it's a really cool program or
it's
a group.
Awesome. So we're going to have a question and answer session with them tomorrow at 2 o'clock if you want to chime in with us. And
unfortunately, I will be up near up near Hertzfield at a old restored schoolhouse hunting ducks. So.
Well, you might need a break from hunting at 2 o'clock. The ducks go out in the morning.
They have no coverage up. I have AT&T. That's more drop calls everywhere. So,
oh, really?
If anyone else
with my AT&T.
I was in Colorado Springs, in town, where camper broke down. And so I pulled off on the side of this busy road. I'm trying to get someone to come and I don't have any reception. I had to stand on top of the pickup hood, on the top of the pickup, just to get one bar. And it happens so often to us. And maybe it's my phone, but it was happening to my wife too. She has a different phone. So anyway.
But I know, like in Little Hazelton.
Oh, okay.
Where I live, my daughter had Verizon and I had AT&T, and she had to get Wi-Fi to use her phone in her house. But I could go in her house and didn't have to use Wi-Fi.
Well, good for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So some
Well,
places AT&T is better.
you know, long story short, I will see if we can connect then.
And
But that,
we'll have it on recording too. So
okay,
you'll be checking our Facebook or our website for
awesome.
those links. They'll be on there one of these days soon.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
Thank
thank you for the
everybody
opportunity.
joining us.
Mhm.
Thank you, Tom. Have a great
Thank
day,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.